We had a couple questions come in about what has been a topic of discussion over the last several months, and that's marijuana and medical marijuana. A viewer from Montevideo wants to know whether or not there will be any changes to the medical marijuana legislation, which of course is already in law, whether that will be amended in some way. And then I guess the secondary question for both of these viewers is what's happening with the whole legalization effort. Let's start with you, Representative Anderson. I don't think we've picked on you yet this evening, so.
Can't think about this one, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
you know, I think a Senate committee this week voted that down, so it appears that it's not going to be taken up this year.
And that would be the full legalization.
Legalization, right, yes. And it's going to come up at some point. I think there seems to be a push for it from, I would say, younger folks, but law enforcement people that I've talked to are not in favor of it, and I just don't know if it's a path we want to go down. But there is a call for it, there is a push for it, but I don't support it. And as far as the medical side of it, that program is working. I've heard it's a little bit high priced. I don't know if insurance covers the medical marijuana in some cases, but so we have that part of it in place. But the medical, the recreational part, I should say, I think, as far as I know, that is dead for the year.
I think there's lots of opportunities to talk about this area. I would say one thing is we have an opioid crisis, and we need to deal with that. And we've, I know in the House there's a bill coming forward that's going to kind of really try to address that. And I don't know where things stand in the Senate, but I know people that have indicated that, you know, if there's some opportunity to use marijuana in place of opioids, that might be something to be thinking about. I think we do need to think about decriminalization to some level, because unfortunately, there are some race and justice issues that people at different standards of living get treated differently when it comes to possession and use of marijuana. So I think we need to be thinking about that. And I think we also, you know, another kind of offshoot to this is we've talked quite a bit about hemp in our Ag Committee, but the CBD, the cannabidiol products, and what that does for people. And I've heard from some people that they've been able to use some CBD product, and that's been also helpful for them. So I think there's a number of issues around the topic. It's not just one thing or another, but I think, you know, when you open the door on the marijuana question, there are some generational differences as well.
Senator Osinski.
We could do an hour on this.
Yes.
I really believe.
We're not going to.
No, I believe that. You know, as recently as 3-4 months ago, I saw both sides of the issue. There's so many compelling arguments for and against legalization. But about 3 months ago, I decided I think I'm in favor of it, and I'll tell you why. 11, 12, 13 states have legalized it. Our nation, our country to the north has legalized it, recreational use. And I don't want to legalize it for tax reasons. I don't think that's a very good argument, in my opinion, because it's to raise revenue. I'd like it to be at least a little bit more intellectual than just let's make.
Well, because there's likely to be some negative side effects that go with legalization.
Correct, and there'll be costs.
Right.
But I think ultimately, I'd like to take it out of the hands of the bad guys and put it in the hands of the state. Because right now we do have an opioid crisis, and with marijuana, my understanding is. People are ODing on it because of the intensity of it, because it's not regulated. So if the government did regulate it and tax it and sell it, I think it would be less. There would be less overdoses occurring from marijuana, and because it's different than the marijuana in the 60s and 70s. It's much more potent. So let's just let's legalize it, regulate it, tax it. Like I said, that's not an argument for it, but and join the other 15, 13, 11 states.
Senator?
Well, you might know where I've come off on this, dealing with it.
Actually, we've had this discussion before in previous years, so
in fact,
we could reference that. But
I proudly actually voted against it and basically killed it in the Judiciary Committee the other day. And I think the public deserved that, deserved a vote, at least an up and down vote, we've had a lot of discussion this summer for sure, and over the last, probably the last 12 months about recreational marijuana. You know, we have two drugs now that are killing us, basically, alcohol and tobacco, and I don't understand why we would legalize our third one. And I have no compelling reasons. There were no compelling reasons in that committee meeting the other day as to what benefit we're going to have here in Minnesota. I'm glad to hear the senator say that taxes wouldn't be one of the reasons he would do it. I know that has been brought up, that we were going to have just this great big money flow coming in, and as the sheriffs in Colorado call it, the money launderers then will be able to decide where to spend the money. Money launderers being the legislature. So I've been following up and doing a lot of investigating on this, and all 87 sheriffs are against it. Over 350 chiefs in the state of Minnesota are against it. And they're against it for a reason. It's a public safety issue. And again, the senator talked about the strength of it now, and how strong it's getting. And there's no quantitative measurement like there is for alcohol when you're driving on the road. So that's a real tough issue. So when you get pulled over, there's no breathalyzer for it. There's no way to test as to how much you've had. So that's a real big concern. Until that comes along, I just can't go along with it at all. And I'm very concerned about the medical thing. Was a kind of a hard thing for me to vote for a couple of years ago. But it has actually, I think it's been pretty decent in Minnesota. I think the CBD aspect of that and pulling that out of the cannabis has been pretty successful. However, it has become quite expensive because, again, it's a Schedule I drug. The federal government still has not approved it. And here we are, states off and still trying to legalize it. And to use the opioid crisis as an excuse really makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't understand that rationale. And I'm very upset with again, and I don't like to do this, but the governor was very much in favor of this, and he being an educator, I was quite surprised. I think it's really sending the wrong message to our youth that alcohol is here, tobacco is here. Mom and Dad use that now, so that must be okay. Now we're going to add this very dangerous drug, and I'm just I'm glad we stopped it for now, and hopefully more people will start looking at this with an open eye. Because it seems like they're set on it or you're either for it or against it. There's no middle ground. But we don't need any more drugs. We just simply don't need to legalize any more drugs. And that's where I'm at.